The title is Untitled for the piece in the show. And my working process, I make mixed media sculptures, actually make drawings and paintings too, but primarily I'm making these figurative works that are made out of found materials. So I used clothing, clothing that I buy from secondhand stores, clothing that people give me. I use my own clothes, and really thinking about things that have already had a history and giving that material a new purpose. Well, first of all, I love the museum. And I've been going to the museum for the last decade, and it's one of my favorite places in Kansas City, and it's one of my favorite museums that I've been to in the world. So when I saw the call, I was pretty excited about it for that reason. But I also make things that are in miniature, and so it seemed like it was really exciting and good fit. I'm interested in working with miniatures, with small figures. One of the things that excites me about it is how a small figure can have so much presence in a space. It can sort of like fill up that space with a narrative or with a sort of psychological element or charge that it was really exciting to me. I think part of it has to do with the intimate scale. So it's like something that can draw you in, something that you maybe would normally associate with play. And so those things allow me to work with subject matter that's maybe not playful. And so I really like that edge or that contradiction. Well, my studio is a mess, and for me, that's a really important part of the process. I usually have an idea for something, and I try to make that thing, and it ends up being not that preconceived idea. It ends up not being that interesting. So for me, what's really exciting is when I decide to change course and combine or take apart, or I see something over here that I can put in that changes things in an interesting way and in an unpredictable way. So for me, it's really important that I have lots of things in my field of vision when I'm working. When I was really young, I started sewing. And so I made my first purse when I was 5 years old. And so that was like just something I really enjoyed doing. I love making things, and I love crafting things. So that's a big part of what kind of like fuels my motivation for working. Also, when I was a kid, we didn't have a lot of money, and I got a lot of my clothes from secondhand shops. So I spent a lot of time like picking out clothes, and I think that, and I had been really obsessed with clothes since a young age. I think partly because clothes are a pretty obvious indicator of wealth. And so that was something that because of my situation, something that I was really kind of concerned with growing up. So I think that does kind of inform what I'm doing now. One of the things that I'm interested in with my work is thinking about how we have drives for cooperation and for building community, and we also have drives to be self-interested, and so I'm very interested in sort of like the contradiction between those drives, and I'm interested in contradiction in general. So I'm often thinking about like private versus public, or ordered versus chaotic. And those are some of the things that I'm thinking about as I'm making that work. So I do have some routines, and some of them are productive and some of them are not productive. And I kind of go back and forth between them. So sometimes I spend a lot of time in my studio just sitting and looking at things, which is not very productive. And but I feel like it's kind of a necessary part of the process. So I do spend a lot of time like thinking and looking, and then when I'm working, I really try not to do that. So I work on multiple things at once. I try to, as soon as I like run out of steam with one thing, I just move to the next thing, and I try to keep that kind of momentum going when I'm working. And I also have a ritual of drawing at night, and that's one way that I develop ideas for projects. And I find the best time for doing that is as I'm falling asleep. So when I'm falling asleep at night, I usually have my phone next to me on my nightstand, and often when I'm half asleep, I wake up with an idea and I grab it and I do sketches on it. So that's an important part of my process. Okay, so I use a lot of different materials. I make paintings, I make paper. I'm actually getting more interested in actually making my own paper and embedding things in paper. I use wood and paint and other found objects, but primarily I'm using fabric. And some of that fabric is fabric that I find in fabric stores. And wherever I go, I shop for fabric. But a lot of the material comes from found clothing, things that have been discarded and that I find on walks, things that my friends and family give me. Sometimes I use my own clothes. I buy a lot of clothes from secondhand stores, and to me, that's an important part of my process is connecting with these things that have been discarded and cast off, and I can give some new purpose to, but also that have a history that maybe I don't know that history explicitly, but when I'm rummaging through my materials in my studio, I do feel like I'm kind of looking through all of these histories, and it kind of sparks my imagination, and I think about that as I'm putting things together. So I started my art career making large-scale figurative paintings, and they were paintings where figures were cropped closely. They were psychologically charged. They had kind of shallow depth of space, and the figures sort of spilled out of that, out of those paintings, and so that really kind of led to the work I'm making, where dramatic lighting and scale and presence became really important to me. And the process of that, like the reason I made that change, I think it was when I was in college, somebody said, well, you should make something that's out of a material that's opposite than what you're using. So I thought, well, I'm making paintings, so maybe I'll make something dimensional. And I'm working with things that are relatively like stiff and hard on panels. So I'll try making something out of soft materials. And I had already had that, all of that experience of sewing as a child. So that transition felt very natural for me to just start making stuff. But actually, I think think I took off my shirt and started cutting it up when I was in my studio and made that into a shirt. And I made a doll that was sort of to my proportions. And then I started putting the clothes that I made for this doll on the doll. And it was in a moment when those clothes were sort of half on and half off, and it was sort of dressing itself, that something happened. I put that into a space in my studio in this sort of human scale environment, and it really filled up the space with this narrative, with this story. And that was kind of the start of the work that you're seeing now. I'm not one of those people that when I was 3 years old, I knew, like, I'm going to be an artist. I'm sort of the opposite of that. I had always done art as a child growing up. And when I went to college, I took classes and continued that path, but I was also interested in math and science. And so I followed that path too for a period of time. So my degree's in mathematics. I started out as a physics major, and then I got a degree in math. But I had been doing art along the way, and I think I just thought, well, can I really do this as a career? And yet I just couldn't stop making things. So I think it wasn't until I had graduated that I really sort of committed to the art path. And then I went on to grad school and did residencies, and that led me to here. I don't think I'm still looking for it. I mean, I don't feel like and it makes me think of when I was watching Ocean Vuong give an interview in Lawrence last year. Ocean Vuong is an author, and they were talking about how they, or the kind of authors that they appreciate reading. And they were talking about how kind of authors they like are the ones that kind of take you on a journey of discovery in some way. Like, you get the feeling they don't really know what they're doing as they're doing it, and you're kind of taken along with that experience. And so for me, that's that really resonates with me, that way of thinking about making art and thinking about art. And so I feel like I'm always like trying to sort of figure out who I am as an artist,